Hey, I always hesitate to say happy Memorial Day. I think it's so awkward. It's not like it's a celebration for me. It's always a somber occasion. And so I have always taken to wishing fellow Americans a reflective Memorial Day, a peaceful Memorial Day, and a grateful Memorial Day. So I hope you are all out there taking time to reflect on the sacrifices of our best and brightest. For me, it's a very different kind of Memorial Day as well. You know, compared to past ones, because I think more and more I've become aware of many disastrous decisions that our government has made to send men and women into battle for wars that were not fought in our best interest. So that's what I'm dwelling on today. I hate to be sort of a blanket on the parade here, and I don't know. I think it's just my cultural thing of seeing so many people so flippantly just take to the grill or the beach and party. And obviously, this is a very different kind of Memorial Day as well because of the pandemic. But for me, it's business as usual. So there's so much in the news that's not getting talked about or buried or warped. And so on this edition of Malkin Live, I am honored to be joined by my friend Vince James of Red Elephants. Hey, Vince.
How you doing?
Good. So the New York Times always comes through for us. And we were just talking just for very briefly before you came on about this horrific piece in the New York Times about the military. Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, no, I think that they could have written about a lot of things. They could have written about sacrifice. They could have written about service. They could have written about how most of these wars didn't have to happen. What most of these wars truly are for. The goals of most of these wars. They could have written about a variety of things, but they decided to write about racist military bases. How they're racist for being named after these particular people. Really, honestly, the what is the family called? I can't remember the exact name of the family, but they never really cease to shock me with a lot of their different headlines. During all of these different attacks at nursing homes, which I'm sure that we're about to get into, many attacks happening in New York City, things like this. They always tend to focus on racism. The white racist, and this is just more proof of this, right?
Yeah.
Confederate statues. It all started with the Confederate statues, then it moved to, the McKinley statues, then it moved to Washington murals, Columbus statues, Columbus Day. I always make this point, and I'm sure that I'm not far off, that eventually, probably, they're going to be calling for the dynamiting of Mount Rushmore after they get done with all of these different statues scattered throughout the United States.
Yeah, for sure. And for people who might not have seen this, because fewer and fewer people are actually reading the New York Times, and they often have their stuff behind the paywall. It's just mind-boggling to me that people would pay for it. There's a huge screen for this Sunday feature op-ed, and the headline reads, "Why does the U.S. military celebrate white supremacy?" And the image is of a bullet with two holes in it so that the bullet looks like a Klan silhouette. I mean, you can't make this up, Vince.
Well, yeah, I mean, their partners over there at their friends over there at the Washington Post, and MSNBC, NBC. Most of the mainstream media is really heavily focusing on race during this pandemic. Do you find that odd? Do you find that interesting?
Yes.
I mean, we're constantly seeing headlines talking about, like, here's one from the Washington Post: what white Americans can learn about racism from the coronavirus.
Yes.
We saw an article come out about Ohio's most populated county declaring racism a public health crisis. We see the Washington Post again talk about, I think the headline was something like, white parents really need to talk with their children about racism during the coronavirus. So it seems like a lot of the times, and then this whole Ahmaud Arbery situation, right? They're really heavily hyper focused on racial issues during this pandemic, sort of maybe possibly steering attention away from certain things that are going on. That could be a correct theory that I've heard.
Yeah.
It is interesting. It is interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And the New York Times leads the way on this in fomenting racial division. By the way, this piece is an unsigned piece that was produced by the entire editorial board. And you look at the editorial board, and they have the most virulent anti-American, anti-white journalists on their panel. I always still marvel that Sarah Jong still has a job.
Right.
I mean, this is the nasty, explicitly anti-white Asian American writer. It's often said, well, what if she were white and had said this about Black people or any other so-called people of color? I mean, she wouldn't even have a job at the local rag, right? Or like the Free Mailer.
No, her whole life would be destroyed.
Right.
Right.
But, and I mean, I've seen this game played for as long as I've been in journalism. This is how you get ahead. And yet I'm the one who's attacked as a token and a sellout.
Well, but most of those attacks are coming from people who are supposed to be conservatives, right? Right. And so we talk about these people saying certain things that would be fired if they were said in another manner. Right. Well, let's take a look at the Daily Wire, for instance. This is a paper that attacks you. These are people that attack you constantly, attack me, right? Attack Nick, attack a bunch of other people. Well, look at what one of their top editors said. He said that hatred against Jewish people is inherent in the DNA of white people.
Yes.
This is what this guy said. So imagine. And I can't remember his name. For some reason, I cannot remember his name for the life of me. But you can just Google that phrase and then put in Daily Wire, and you'll be able to pop up with his name. Maybe someone will say it in the chat. But this is what he said. Now, imagine if someone said anything even close to this in the format where it's white people being the victims, right? That hatred for European people is inherent in the Jewish DNA. Imagine if someone said that at the Daily Wire. Ben Shapiro would have fired him immediately. This guy didn't get reprimanded. This guy didn't get punished. As a matter of fact, he tweeted this multiple times.
Yes.
And didn't even delete his tweet, as far as I know.
It is Josh Hammer.
Josh Hammer. Someone said it in the chat there. Josh Hammer. Right.
Yeah. And so, yes. So if you're a member of a certain privileged group, be it the New York Times editorial board or the Daily Wire editorial board, you can indulge in your kind of identity politics. But anyone who calls you out for it, of course, is immediately branded a racist, xenophobe, the whole thing. We get on the SPLC hate list. We're both on it. And speaking of which, this is a good segue. Because one of the things that gets you in trouble, you and I, and anyone who sees these things clearly, of course, is the double standard when it comes to covering certain racial-based crimes. So you've got an amazing piece, and I'm going to make sure that people know to visit theredelephants.com for more information. The piece that you posted over the weekend, Black on white nursing home attacks are extremely common, just like Black on white crime. And of course, this is in the aftermath of that horrific Detroit thug beating. So I wanted you to bring people up because there's been a couple of significant developments in that case, but also the context in which your article sets it, that this is not a rare occurrence.
Yeah, I mean, this shouldn't be anything. This should not be like a controversial point. I mean, Larry Elder talks about this all the time. He's never called a Nazi or maybe he is. I don't know. He might be, but he's certainly called hateful. I know this, but he's telling the truth. And what I'm doing is telling the truth. It's not the reason why I'm pointing this out isn't because I want people to have disdain for certain groups or to prop a certain group up above another group or vice versa. The reason why I'm pointing this out is because the mainstream media, who calls us radicalizers, calls YouTube a radicalization machine, is radicalizing people to go out and commit attacks like we saw in 2015 in Baton Rouge, in 2015 in Dallas with the 5 police officers shot by the black nationalists. We're seeing it, constantly in New York City. We're seeing it during this coronavirus outbreak, where we possibly saw something that occurred because of the media's coverage of Ahmaud Arbery in Delaware, where a black man went on to snipe an old white couple. His social media suggests, according to sources close that are aware, this wasn't even covered in the media, by the way, much like this nursing home attacker.
Right. Your website broke the story.
Right. Correct. Right. Sasha's doing good work over there at the redelephants.com. But yeah, so, this possibly could have happened because of the media's coverage on Ahmaud Arbery. And they're like we're seeing here from the Washington Post, what white Americans can learn about racism from the coronavirus. We're seeing, things come out of these mainstream outlets all the time about racism and how, white people are to blame for racism. But really, what's really happening is the complete reverse of this, right? And like I was just going back to Larry Elder, he's pointed this out a couple of times, even most recently on his Twitter account. And the reason why we're pointing these things out is because we need to combat the mainstream narrative that there are just millions of racist white people roaming about, hunting down innocent black joggers, trying to lynch them. This is not even close to the truth. As a matter of fact, the reverse is probably more true, even though it's really not true, than what they're trying to sell us. And so this is the whole point of me hyper focusing on this, especially when we see headlines like this come out of the mainstream outlets. And
it is such a Herculean task to undo that narrative when you've got Hollywood, the media, and academia, and leading Democrat politicians hammering at it every single day. There's a graph in your piece at redelephants.com that has interracial violent crime incidents for 2018 broken down. And, you look at the bar chart, and black on white incidents number nearly 550,000, which is just so astonishing. And I guess in second place is Hispanic on white, and then white on black, teeny tiny, down at not even 60,000.
Right. And this is basically every year it's like this, right? Mm-hmm. Every year the Bureau of Justice releases their crime victimization. And this is from the Bureau of Justice, and every single year it shows about the same. From 2012 to 2015, it's even a bigger gap, right? We're talking about a 3-year period. And I think in 2018 was the last time that we have the numbers for this. And between blacks and whites, 90% of the interracial crime was black on white. But so you see, the media focuses on the less than 10%, 90% of the time, and the more than 90% less than 10% of the time. And when they even do focus on it less than 10% of the time, they rarely ever mention race in the headlines. Or, just look at some of the articles coming out about this guy, what was his name? Jaden Hayden, the nursing home attacker that Tucker Carlson covered. Basically was one of the only ones to cover them. And you look at the articles coming out, few and far between, by the way, and you don't even see race mentioned in the headline. Now, listen, if the media decides to never mention race with certain attacks, sort of go back to where we were 30, 40 years ago, never mentioning race in the attacks, instead of only mentioning race when it's a white attacker, then I'll be completely fine with that. But let's be a little bit more honest here, guys, because what you're trying to sell us is that they're, like we said, they're just white racist rednecks roaming about. You can't even go jogging anymore, like LeBron James says. Right. And statistically, this is not true at all. However, it is objectively true that 90% of the interracial crime is black on white. If we even look at the SPLC, you mentioned the SPLC, that we're on the SPLC's hate map or hate chart or something. Yeah, right. Their own statistics show that, and they're basically the only ones that keep track of this. You have to take what they say with a grain of salt, of course, but their own statistics show that black Americans are 60-70% overrepresented in hate groups, and white Americans are underrepresented vastly. Yeah. And the FBI shows this for hate crimes too. Black Americans are 50% overrepresented for hate crimes, and white Americans are underrepresented. So, you look at the only racial group that's overrepresented in hate groups, the only racial group that is growing substantially in hate groups, according to the SPLC's number, the only racial group that is overrepresented for hate crimes, the only racial group that commits most of the interracial crime. It just goes on and on and on. And yet we still see articles like this trying to convince the majority of the population that actually it's in the reverse. It's like completely backwards.
Yeah. Right. And you can see how it all intersects and works together, right? You've got this lead New York Times editorial with the bullet and the Klan, right? Like as if we're still living in the 40s or 50s, fomenting all of this hysteria at the same time that the media looks the other way at black on white crime. And then all of the SJW powers that be are demonizing anybody who points out the obvious. And you mentioned Larry Elder, and I just want to read a tweet that you retweeted of his, where he said of last year's 7,000 black murder victims, how many were killed by white supremacists? Blacks, who are 13% of the population, commit nearly 30% of hate crimes. Whites, 60% of the population, commit less than 50% of hate crimes. Blacks kill more whites, 500 per year, than whites kill blacks. And as an extension, of course, putting this in the pandemic context, now Asian American liberals are trying to do the same thing. I don't know if you caught the story the other day, but now there are these sort of guardian angel squads in Chinatown that are patrolling the streets to protect Chinese people from being beaten by all of the racists out there because there's supposedly some epidemic, right? Yeah. They're like copying Curtis Sliwa. Remember him from
Guardian Angels, Chinatown.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Chinese Americans patrol streets of New York. Oh, New York Times article. Sweet.
There you go. Right.
Oh, they're dressed up in. Is this the same? This is the same group, the Guardian Angels.
The same one. Oh, I thought it was like they had.
Or maybe no. I don't. Is it the same group? I don't know. They look like the same group.
Yeah,
unless they're trying to knock them off.
Yeah. So you've done reporting on this. Can you share with because we talked about it on your show, but for a lot of people who have no idea what's happening, I mean, the New York Times, the Washington Post have been painting this picture of every Asian American in America trembling that they might be beaten over the pandemic.
First of all, there's no evidence to suggest that there is a vast increase in attacks on Asian Americans. There's no evidence to suggest this because we have no evidence to really compare it to. And I've looked at the numbers. I've looked at the numbers from the Bureau of Justice. I've looked at the numbers from the FBI. I've looked at the numbers that Vox is publishing. I mean, I don't even know exactly where they're, what they're controlled. They're coming up with like really bunk studies. That's first of all. Mm-hmm. Second of all, if we look at the majority of the attacks on Asian Americans, they're mostly occurring in New York City, in Brooklyn, in the Bronx, and they're mostly perpetrated by Black Americans, a lot of whom are Black teens. So the reason, there's no way that these teenagers are involved or interested in politics whatsoever. They're teenagers, okay? It's definitely no way that they voted for Trump or that they support Trump or they even listen to what Trump says. So the narrative is, or the narrative was, they're not really hyper focusing on this anymore because they've noticed that, there are accompanying videos to a lot of these different Asian attacks, and people can clearly see who these perpetrators are, right? So they're not really heavily focused on this anymore. But we compiled the list on the redelephants.com of all the attacks on Asian Americans since the outbreak began, or since we became like hyper aware of the outbreak at the beginning of February. Almost 100% of them were perpetrated by Black Americans. So the narrative was that because Donald Trump called it the Chinese virus, which, by the way, the Washington Post did on their headlines explicitly, Chinese virus, New York Times. I have all the screenshots, right? I have the paper, the actual paper itself. So the narrative was that since Donald Trump called it the Chinese virus, that there are all these attacks on Asians happening, and it's like this white racism. But see, that sort of narrative has died down because people see these viral videos floating around of Black teens drop kicking Asian women in the face at bus stops. And, Hispanic guys going into Sam's Club and committing mass stabbings against an Asian family. So
Yes, that's the one in Texas, right?
right. So
Yeah.
that, it's just ridiculous. But the problem is that when you look at most of the responses to a lot of these tweets from like the New York Times or from Larry Elder, even, you see that the majority of it seems like the majority of the people just don't get it. They think they're still believing sort of like the mainstream narrative on this. It's like they don't change when presented with new information, they just refuse to absorb this new information and change their opinion.
Right. They just double down, triple down. I wish it were just the New York Times and Washington Post fomenting these false images and false narratives. Did you catch the picture that was run with the Fox News story about the Michigan beating? I wish I could show it to you.
No, I did see a screenshot of that. Remind me, and then I'll see it in my head.
So, Michigan care home patient 75 brutally beaten in attack caught on video. Trump reacts. So it highlighted the fact that Trump had tweeted over the weekend. Remember, he said, "Is this even possible?" The picture that accompanies the Fox News website news story is a picture of an old black man at a nursing home.
I remember that.
A white nursing home worker.
Yes. I'd like to know who Fox News, who makes the decision. You used to work at Fox. Who makes the decision for like the thumbnails on the articles? Is there like one person, or is it like the writer themselves, or
it's probably
editor?
Yeah, it's probably not the writer. It's probably an editor. Now, This may have been one of those oopsie type things, but the fact is a lot more people who watch Fox carefully are very frustrated with this kind of thing. And I think it's because, this is corporate media. They're based in New York. Roger Ailes has, passed, and he did not apparently pass the torch on for people to police this kind of stuff so that, Fox News viewers could know that they could trust the website, at least as a neutral arbiter. And, whether it was a mistake or not, this news article is going to be shared millions of times on Facebook and social media and Twitter, and it's just going to continue to propagate this false narrative. It's annoying.
Yeah, that is annoying. I wonder what happened there, because it's clearly like, I wonder if the editor was just, so I've worked with like getting pieces published in certain papers here and there. Mm-hmm. And I know that the editor mainly chooses I think it's the editor that mainly chooses the thumbnail.
Yeah.
I wonder if they they could have done this on purpose, right? To not seem racist or what have you. Mm-hmm. That could be one thing, but also it could be something to where they just had a bunch of stock images that they already purchased, and this was, I don't know what happened there, but that was clearly ridiculous. I remember seeing that.
I know, and they didn't change it. That's the thing. I do know that a lot of those editors pay close attention to Twitter chatter. Whether it's a like I said, whether it's an oopsie or not, it's just one more thing that compounds this. The horrible bias that we have to face every single day. And we talked about this when I chatted with you last time too about the Ahmed Arbery stuff. This kind of selectivity about ignoring black on white crime goes back, decades. And I know I talked with you about a piece that still floats around on YouTube that I did on the Knoxville horror, where a young white couple was brutally raped, murdered. The girl was forced to swallow bleach, and the prosecution went on. It went on forever. I think it took about 10 years for the prosecutor to get convictions in that case. Right. But I was called a racist for highlighting it. And there was another horrible case 19 years ago called the Wichita Massacre. I don't know if you have any recollection or ever happened on this, but there were two young black thugs who were involved in serial killings across Wichita, all white victims. They were sentenced to death, and then Kansas repealed the death penalty. And, this is the kind of thing, really? Right? It's weird because we live in this sort of true crime culture, right? There's court TV. Everybody loves to talk about crime. There's a gazillion crime shows, but these crimes never get the kind of loft that politically convenient ones do.
Wichita Massacre 2004?
Yeah.
Was that it? Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's just so ridiculous because what are we constantly hearing? Like with this whole nursing home thing. So we hear in healthcare that Black Americans are being discriminated against and they're dying at higher rates from the coronavirus because our healthcare system is inherently racist. But I've never seen this many videos of white care workers beating up on Black elderly patients. I've never seen this. I've never seen, we're hearing about like all these white racists roaming the streets, just beating up people at random, right? Lynching people. I've never seen groups of white teens roaming around, just selectively targeting certain individuals, beating them in the streets. But we see hundreds of viral videos in the reverse, not hundreds, thousands of viral videos in the reverse of groups of teens beating up white individuals. I've never seen just random white people walking up and stabbing Black individuals. But whenever it is covered, in the very rare event that it does occur, in the extremely rare event that it does occur, the media jumps on it immediately. I mean, just imagine if during this whole coronavirus outbreak, we saw some white guy drop kicking an Asian person in the face, like we saw that viral video of that Black guy doing that. Can you imagine what they would be? And then the whole Sam's Club issue, right? During the coronavirus, some guy walks into Sam's Club, commits a mass stabbing against an Asian family. If that was a white guy, we'd be having constant hearings on white supremacy in Congress right now. They'd be passing laws to ban people from social media. The ADL would be out in full force.
Oh, yeah.
It's just ridiculous to me. And so this is the narrative that a lot of people are sold. And honestly, you said it's so hard to fight against this narrative because they're so powerful. They have such a big reach. Well, if we had conservative ink on our side, like they should be, instead of constantly ceding to the left on a lot of these different issues to try to seem not racist, like the Ben Shapiro's and the Charlie Kirks and the Daily Wires and the Matt Walshes, if they would just stop for a minute and stop cucking, honestly, I mean, that's the only word that comes to mind. Stop caving and conceding to the left like the weak little POSs that they are, then maybe we would have the reach that we need in order to become the true opposing force to this liberal globalist narrative that they're forcing down the throats of the American people. But we don't have them on their side. With conservatives like these, who needs liberals? I say it all the time, and it's the truth. I mean, they really are doing as much damage as the liberal left is.
Amen.
Rhetorically, they're conservative. Rhetorically, they're against the liberals. Rhetorically, they're against SJWs as Ben Shapiro destroys another one. But every single time we see something like this happen where we need them on our side to combat this narrative, Covington Catholic, this situation, all of these different things happening, they cower in fear. They're cowards, and they need to be replaced. And we're going to replace them. America first, as Nick says, as you say, it's inevitable. Yes. We're coming. And we're going to replace you. We are going to replace you. And that's right. About conservative ink.
Amen. Preach it, Vince.
It just makes me so angry.
Capitulating, cowering, cucking, clucking, all of it. And it's interesting because I haven't checked, but I haven't seen many prominent blue-checked con inkers making the Jaden Hayden incident their obsession, right? You don't see them rushing to talk about this and to highlight it. And
but you see, it's not just Jaden Hayden, though. I mean, there's like if you on our website, we have. I mean, there's a compilation. There's hundreds of videos just like this.
Yes.
Right? The problem is it's not that they don't cover it. Like, fine. Like in an ideal world, like we wouldn't have all this craziness happening, right? In an ideal world, there wouldn't be like, why did a white man attack Alma, or what was her name? Anita Wilson at a subway. It was like some like crazy homeless guy who stabbed this Black lady in Oakland, had no racial motivation whatsoever. But this was the headline coming from CNN. Meanwhile, these things happen all the time in the reverse, but we have no headlines about them, right? So it's not that they don't cover it, that Conservative Inc. doesn't cover it. It's just that they let this narrative go freely. They let the narrative of the Covington Catholic kids go freely. They left it up to us these like independent YouTubers, me, Buzz31, you, a bunch of other people, to come up and actually dig into the full live stream to figure out what the heck happened.
Right.
Because if we didn't do this, if we didn't have the internet and the capability to do this, then this narrative of, you know, these racist white kids from Covington, from a Catholic high school during a pro-life march, were like getting in the face of this Vietnam veteran Native American, when literally none of that was true.
Right.
Like Buzz131 is this channel, this YouTube channel. He had like almost 1 million subscribers. He's been on YouTube for 14 years. His whole thing was digging into like and exposing what is it called when someone pretends to be a military person? A stolen valor.
Right, that's right.
Stolen valor. So he digs up the record on Nathan Phillips. Yep. Turns out this guy was making refrigerators in like Kansas during the Vietnam War. So this guy is not a Vietnam War veteran like he claimed to be on video. Basically, everything is wrong. CNN must have seen the live stream for the Covington Catholic kids, because they talked about the 5 black gentlemen preaching about the Bible and oppression nearby, when that's not what they were doing at all. They were calling people, you know, we see what they were doing. Right? Yes. We can't repeat it here.
No, not optical.
Right. But you know, they must have seen it, but they chose to report it differently. Now, imagine if we didn't have the capability and the reach and social media in order to put pressure. And even The Guardian wrote about this. They said these alternative pundits made us change the narrative, which was actually correct about the Covington Catholics. Now, imagine what we can do if we actually had Conservative Incorporated on our side with their reach and their power and their connections. Imagine what we could do. But we can't, because they're not on our side. They're on the left side.
Yeah.
So.
But like you said, America first, like we all say, it's inevitable. It cannot be contained. And despite all of the levers of power, rigging the game and putting the thumb on the scales, your YouTube channel is just awesome. And more people are watching. What's the best way to put the YouTube address on?
Oh, it's just, you can just go to the Red Elephants on YouTube.
Got it.
But did you happen to see, some people are talking about in the chat, the Karens? Did you happen to see that mob of Karens that was like ganging up?
I said, what do you call them? Shame. So I said, what do you call a mob of Karens? Because, you know, there's all sorts of names for different types of animal packs, right? Herds, gaggles. There's a lot of great responses in my tweet on that. We should call them tattles, like instead of a gaggle. They're a tattle.
Just call them a blob of Karens. They all seem to just be like, just sort of like waddling about, having their cookies and their milkshakes and French fries. The blob of Karens.
Yes.
Like shaming this person out of the grocery store for not wearing a mask. Like, which, by the way, the CDC just came out and said that it can't even travel in the air easily. Yeah.
That's
like,
right.
How can they make that mistake? This whole time we were being told that it could stay in the air for 3 hours down the aisle, down the shopping aisle. If someone comes down the aisle with coronavirus, that virus is going to still be there in the air, floating down, and you'll be able to inhale it. This is what they told us. Now they're saying, well, that's not at all the case.
Right.
Actually, it doesn't even travel through the air that easily. Very hard does it travel through the air. So, like, what can we believe? Can we believe anything what they're saying? Every time they come out, they're changing their opinions on certain things. The WHO, CDC,
Transmission by contact on surfaces. Yes, no, maybe. Right. One of the most pathetic images to me is of a solo driver driving with a mask with his windows rolled up in his car.
I've seen that before.
What the hell?
Yeah, I think the people are just, because I got to say this, because I have put like a mask on. I went to a grocery store and then I forgot, because like every time we go out to go to the grocery shopping, I put the mask on, and then I get in the car and then I forget that it's on, and then I'm like, what am I doing? I take the mask off and then continue to drive. So I got to say, maybe that could be it. But if he's wearing like gloves still and stuff like that, then probably not. Yeah. But like, here's the thing. It's like we look at and this is something that Rand Paul grilled Dr. Fauci on recently. He said, listen, we're looking at this antibody testing data, and we're seeing that the death rate is like far lower than 1%, closer to, in certain states, 0.03%, 0.06%. We're looking at this data. Why aren't you talking about this data? Why are you still pushing this narrative? And Dr. Fauci really had nothing to say about this. Meanwhile, Dr. Fauci comes out recently and says that if we keep the economy shut down, it could cause irreparable damage. So they're constantly changing what they used to say. The WHO said that it couldn't be transmitted from human to human in the beginning. Now they're coming out and saying that actually, like you said, like on surfaces, it probably is not going to last on surfaces that long, like we used to think. And so it's like, what do we believe? What do we believe? Because we were told that this is the end. This is the virus X. Remember this theory? This is virus X, that it's a 15% death rate, or a 5% death rate, or maybe a 20% death rate. We don't know. You're going to die. Stay inside. Get your, shut down the economy forever. And then we come to find out that this is not true at all. It's like more like a 0.06% death rate or 0.03% mortality rate. Almost zero, basically zero from ages 0 to 25. And this is what we're destroying the livelihoods of millions of people over. And actually, more people are going to die from the shutdown itself than the virus, because of the deaths of despair that have increased 4 times, 5 times since the start of this entire thing. And so then we have these blobs of Karens chasing people out of the supermarket for not wearing masks. I wish that would happen to me. I wish someone would try to do that to me. That would be so hilarious. The results of that would conclude with hilarious results. I'll say that.
Somebody in comments calls them a rabid flock of Karens.
Right. They're
right. So we have a couple minutes left. Do you have any Memorial Day reflections or thoughts?
Yeah, I went to the beach on because the beach is opened up here in California, and so I went to the beach with my family on, when was it? Is it Saturday? What day is it today? Monday, right? Mm-hmm. Sorry, Memorial Day, Monday. Saturday, and we're walking down Crystal Cove in Laguna, and there's this really steep hill to get down to the beach, and you think that you should be worried about coronavirus and the spread of the virus, but actually what happened was I rolled my ankle. So I rolled my ankle, and down this hill, and usually I've rolled my ankle before. I usually catch myself, right? But since there was such a steep decline in this hill, I wasn't able to catch myself. And so I broke my 4th metatarsal in my foot as my foot rolled completely over. I go to the hospital once again. So exposed to the coronavirus at the beach, exposed to the coronavirus at the hospital. The hospital is like a ghost town. And this is like one of the biggest, if not the biggest hospital in my, within a 50-mile radius of where I'm at, where I live, right? The biggest, most advanced hospital. And I go in there and it's a ghost town. I'm treated immediately. There's a podiatrist that comes up, does an x-ray on my foot. I get the results within 2 minutes. Now, mind you, they do separate the COVID patients from the rest of the patients at hospitals now. But the thing is that the doctor himself even said it's not even close to as bad as what they were reporting. I mean, this is what the doctor said himself. Mm-hmm. And so I get treated right away, get out of there. So the worst thing that happened, going to the beach as the beaches open up, going to the hospital as the hospital opens up, is that go to the hospital in fear of getting COVID-19, is I break my 4th metatarsal on my foot. Now I have to wear a boot for 8 weeks, but there's no way I'm doing that. I'm taking it off and I'm just going to withstand the pain until it goes away. I'm not wearing one of this huge boot for 8 weeks. That's just ridiculous. I'm working out today, so.
You have to do ankle rehab. That's what you.
Well, it's not the ankle, so it's the top of the foot. It's the bone. Yeah, the ankle's completely fine.
But you're used to rolling your ankle. You must have weakness.
I rolled my ankle. Oh, right. Yeah, I rolled that ankle all the time. So I've rolled the ankle. Once you roll the ankle, I guess the doctors say that, it's easy to roll the ankle again. So yeah, you're right. I should strengthen that ankle. But I mean, it doesn't seem. What's the word now I'm searching for with, where the muscles get weaker. What's the word? Atrophy. Yeah, it doesn't seem atrophied.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems normal. As a matter, it seems like stronger than my right ankle that I don't ever roll. So I'm not sure what's going on there. But it was the top of the foot that broke. So painful.
Yeah, not fun.
Luckily, no surgery or anything like that.
Yeah, but you will have limited mobility.
Certainly, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, thank you. I'm going to let you get on with the rest of your holiday. And everyone can visit the Red Elephants on YouTube or the fantastic website that Vince runs, the redelephants.com. You're the one of the most prolific and dogged researchers, investigators, and analytical presences on social media and the internet. And that's why you're a target, because you're effective. And appreciate.
Well, I appreciate the good comments there, positive comments. I wouldn't really consider myself an investigator. I guess in the sense of like looking up certain things and researching certain things, certainly. But
yes,
I tend to take a more modest stance when I hear terms like that. But
well, I'm conferring it upon you. And by the way, I think I mentioned to you offline that I tried to get your merch so that I could wear it today, but I didn't.
It didn't come yet.
Time. Yeah. Well, it's probably waiting at the mailbox now because I forgot about the holiday.
I'm gonna have to talk to my guy over there and see what's going on. Yeah.
But next time, and we definitely have to have you on next time. I'll be wearing my Red Elephants hat.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
All right. Take care, Vince.
All right. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Bye.